So I'm gonna be real, I get a lot of hate on my videos, especially the ones where I talk about my property investments. Now I normally ignore comments because these comments actually affect me a lot, and I realize it's kind of crazy to just like listen to random strangers on the internet. But this time I decided to interact with someone and kind of have a long debate with them because I thought his comments seemed to be logical, like he was coming from a place of understanding. And I thought there were a lot of interesting points in there that I could talk about, and that's kind of why I wanted to make this episode, because I wanted to go over some of these points today. And a lot of it is around stocks versus real estate, so I wanted to cover my thoughts on this. But basically in this video, I go over how I put in about $85,000 for a property that cash flows about $676 per month. And now I've had this property for about 11 years. So I'm just gonna read this comment. If you invested the 25% down plus closing costs plus renovations plus monthly contributions that made up all your taxes, expenses, etc. into the S&P 500, you'd have $660,000 plus. If you invested that amount into Nvidia, you'd have $36 million. I think there was a huge opportunity cost loss not investing in the right stuff. Also, your sweat equity and stress would have been zero, since once you invested in it, you just leave it alone. All right, so I'm gonna address every single point in this comment. Now, the first point I wanted to make is this first property that I invested in is now worth over $600,000, and it cash flows about $800 per month now. As you can see, it cash flows more than it did before. Now, one thing I didn't say is that this property could actually cash flow way more. Based on estimates, I could be charging over $1,000 more in rent than I actually do, but I really like my tenant. I don't feel like increasing rents on them. Yeah, it would make me a lot more cash flow, but I don't really want to charge them that much more, even though the average rents are $1,000 more than what I'm charging right now. So again, I could be making a lot more money on this investment, but I feel like it's doing amazingly well. It's been pretty passive because, again, I like the tenants and I hired property managers for this property, so it makes everything passive. I don't have to deal with tenant issues. I don't have to deal with evictions or anything like that, trying to get new tenants in, inspecting the home. Like, they basically do everything for me for that, and they can do the job a lot better than I could. So that's why I like to hire property managers. So going back to that point, with real estate, you have to think about the appreciation play here. You also need to consider that cash flow can keep increasing. I would say that cash flow grants you freedom while appreciation gives you wealth. I also didn't even mention leverage here. So one of the benefits is that instead of me putting in that $240,000 for that purchase price, I put in $85,000 instead. I put in 25% plus closing costs, plus I renovated it a bit, which made it so it was about $85,000. But basically with leverage, your ROI is higher because you aren't putting in the full purchase price. As the property increases in value, you're making more on your money. Real estate can be stressful depending on your investment. If you made a bad investment, yeah, it can be stressful. Or if there's a ton of renovations, it can initially be stressful, but it can also be very hands-off once you get it to that point. Usually I like to say that there's about a 1-year period before it stabilizes. So it can take some time for it to be more of like a machine for you where you don't have to worry about it too much. But ultimately, if you have a property management company in place, it can be very hands-off. And you have to make sure you hire the right people too. If you have bad property managers, it'll still make your life pretty hard. Now, case in point, I've literally been traveling over 9 months now, and I have over 20 units. If it were really that stressful, I wouldn't be traveling for this long, right? So if you have the right players in place, you have the right investments, it doesn't have to be that stressful, and it can be pretty hands-off. I don't spend that much time on my real estate, and it covers my living expenses, which is amazing. So that's why I feel like that comment that he made about stress isn't that valid to me, which goes into what I was gonna say next, is that we retired over 3 years ago, and a lot of it is because of real estate. While the real estate pays for our living expenses, our online income lets us keep putting in recurring investments into index funds and ETFs, and it also lets us continuously save. So I'm gonna move on to my next point. Even though real estate comprises most of our net worth, we still have 1.6 mil in ETFs and index funds, and that is only 30% of our net worth. So I'm not saying that you should go all in on one or all in on the other. In fact, I'm actually more of like a hybrid approach. I like diversification. I like peace of mind. Whereas a lot of, I think, real estate gurus are all like, go all in on real estate. Like, don't mess with anything else. This is the way to go. And I can see why it is very beneficial to go in on real estate, because you can grow your net worth super fast by doing so. And honestly, my net worth skyrocketed as I started investing in real estate. But at the same time, what matters to me is really peace of mind. I don't care about being like the biggest, baddest real estate investor. I want to make sure that I can sleep well at night. I don't have to worry a lot lot. And when I have a kid, I don't have to worry about finances. Like, I want to be good in that area. And that's kind of what my goal has always been, to be stress-free and also to be able to live to my fullest potential. I think that is one of the things that I care about most, that freedom to live a life without those financial restrictions. And that's why I approach my finances in this way. Now, in his comment, he mentions Nvidia. Now, I think talking about Nvidia is really not a fair comparison. Statistics show that most people who pick individual stocks usually lose. That's why I think it's better to invest in the total market. So that's why I talk about index funds and ETFs. And ETFs are basically like a basket of stocks. You aren't investing in just one, you are diversifying with a bunch. It's following the total market. And looking at the S&P 500, for example, the index has returned a historic annualized average return of around 10.26% since its 1957 inception through the end of 2023. So I think investing in the total market is safer, and it has had really massive gains over the years. So yeah, that's why essentially I don't believe you can compare with like GameStop or like crypto or whatever, where you're like, oh, I would have made so much more if I invested in this one thing, and you should have invested in that thing because it did so well in this time period. You never know what's going to happen, and most people lose when they do that. So it's better to invest in the total market. And then another thing I wanted to mention is you shouldn't forget about the other plays aside from cash flow. It's the debt pay down, it's the leverage, it's the appreciation. The tax benefits are huge that I don't even mention here. If you guys haven't seen my other videos on the benefits of real estate, you guys should definitely check it out, because for example, with tax benefits, you have depreciation, you have step up in basis. There are a lot of different benefits from holding on to real estate. The last thing I wanted to mention to him is, though I love index funds and ETFs, if you retire on this alone, you basically have to sell off gradually, right? And the hope is with the 4% rule, for example, you aren't touching the principal, you're just touching the gains. That's what makes it safer. And I think that's a great way to look at it. But also, because I have it combined with real estate, I'm able to have that income pay for my living expenses, and I can still add to my index funds and ETFs and have that portfolio grow rather than take from it. And I think that's just like safer and a great feeling. After I said that, it got very aggressive. So here's what he replied back. If you learn how to read, I mentioned all the closing costs, renovations, and monthly costs you have to put in. Use a calculator, and it's $660,000. Also, you leave out the stresses and miscellaneous costs of owning real estate. $800 a month cash flow, LMAO. 10% on $660K would be $5,500 a month. Your $1.6 million isn't much to brag about, LOL. You could have picked any tech stock or crypto play, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, and would have 10x the amount compared to this property. I'd rather pay taxes on $32 million rather than $800 a month, LOL. Who shoots for the goal to be most? If you actually put the effort into understanding businesses, you could have picked any individual stock and made way more. Just take the L and realize you made the mistake of listening to your parents on buying real estate instead of tech stocks. So here's what happens, right? When you reply, you just like somehow instigate them more. Even though I feel like I was being pretty logical with my response, it just stirs so much more. That's why I don't like to reply to comments, because it doesn't really help anything. If they don't see what you're seeing, they're probably not gonna like listen to you or care, and they're just gonna go with their own belief anyway. But anyway, I decided to respond. So this is what I basically said. My cash flow is after paying off those monthly expenses. So saying that those added together and invested would amount to $660,000 is a bit inaccurate, because it's not like I'm buying a negatively cash flowing property where I'm losing that amount every single month that could have been put in the stock market. In fact, that $800 per month additional income could be put into the stock market as well. So I think that when people hate on real estate, they're thinking about all these monthly costs, whereas in reality, if you're investing in real estate, you are buying a property that makes up for those expenses as well as makes money for you. So it is inaccurate to say that those monthly costs should be added into this calculation, right? You are actually making money. You're not losing money. And that money I'm making, I can put that into the stock market. Like, we are putting in a good amount recurring back into the stock market. I'm not saying you have to go all in on one or the other, like I mentioned. That's why I do that hybrid approach. So when you are investing in real estate, you have to look at that bigger picture. So again, I had to emphasize to them that I'm not saying one or the other is better with real estate or stocks. And I mentioned that I literally have both, including the picks that he mentioned. Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, I have those picks. stocks. And if he's talking about Nvidia, we have that too. Like, we gained a lot from that as well. But I'm not gonna put all my money into Nvidia, right? That is why it can get dangerous. We met someone at this conference one time that he was putting all his money on this coin, this crypto coin. He was taking 2 jobs, working until midnight so that he could fund this coin, and hopefully it'll make him extremely rich. That is honestly very risky. It can work, but it is very risky, okay? So I did mention here, in an ideal world, you put all your life savings into some stock like Nvidia and it booms. And some people achieve that, and congrats to them. But in reality, you can't ever 100% say what's gonna be a winner. And hindsight is 2020, which is why we invest for diversification and peace of mind. Now, he was making a jab at the whole net worth thing. So the 1.6 mil is 30% of my net worth. I didn't mention the 30% in my original comment, and that's why I said it here. I didn't feel like I needed to reveal that. But I mentioned that this doesn't matter. If you have more, that's cool. Like, I don't care and I don't need more. This is just what works for me. I don't think that this net worth thing should be a race. It should be what's enough for you, and that's why it's personal finance. It's personal. Everyone's journey is different. So if he has less or more and it's great for him, like, that is great for you. I don't care if you have more or less than me, right? And I don't think we should view this as a competition. You should just figure out your goal based on what's enough for you and then work backwards towards that goal. So I basically ended it with this. We are happy with where we're at. And I'm sure you're doing well too if what you said worked for you. So congrats. We can both be happy. Best wishes to you. I just want what's best for other people. It's cool if he thinks this one strategy is better than my strategy. I mentioned my points, but ultimately when I was responding, this was just about my situation. Other people can judge my situation, but this is what works for me and I'm happy with it. I'm not saying that this is something everyone needs to do. This is just what works for me. Now, if he's saying that these other plays are better, if you are able to say those things, then you are probably doing extremely well, because you probably picked Nvidia with all your life savings and did really well with that. And maybe that's not true, and maybe he's just a random dude saying all these things, but if he really did that, congrats, right? And all I'm doing is mentioning what I did so people can see what I did and decide if that's cool and that's something they want to do, or if it's not something they want to do. And that's totally fine. The whole point of me putting this content out here is hopefully to give you guys some perspective, help you guys form your own opinions on what's right for your own finances. I'm not pushing my agenda on other people. I'm just showing what has worked for us, and I hope it's just informational for you guys. So I covered a lot of points here, and the topic really was stocks versus real estate. And overall, what I'm really trying to say is both are great. I do both. I invest in both. And there are a lot of pros and cons with the different ones. And hopefully you guys got to see a lot of the benefits that I've found in real estate. It's honestly helped us a lot with our journey and allowed us to retire earlier. And now I'm just recurring, putting it into index funds and ETFs. And I will buy more real estate in the future. Right now, I'm just like enjoying what I have created for myself. So we've been traveling all over the world for almost a year now. And I am very grateful towards real estate for allowing me to do that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified of my latest videos. I'll see you guys in the next one.